Most of your problems don't come from outside. Not from the economy, not from the people around you, not from bad luck, not from the circumstances you were born into or the ones that appeared without warning. They come from in here, from a mind that was never trained to govern itself. And that truth is uncomfortable, genuinely uncomfortable, because it implies something that most people spend their entire lives carefully avoiding. That you are responsible for almost everything that happens to you. Not for what happens, you don't control that, but for what you do with it. And in that difference, in that tiny space between what the world throws at you and how you respond, lives either your freedom or your prison. Think about how many times you have said, "They made me lose my temper, I couldn't control myself, the situation was too much." How many times have you handed the wheel of your own life to something outside of you? Every time you did that, you gave away the only thing that was ever truly yours, your response. And if you have been doing that for years, what you feel is not bad luck. It is the natural result of living reactively, at the mercy of whatever the world decides to throw at you on any given day. This is not an accusation. It is a diagnosis. And like every honest diagnosis, it is uncomfortable before it is liberating. There are two types of people in any situation of pressure, and you have seen both of them. You may have been both of them at different points in your life. The first acts from fear, from urgency, from the desperate need for the discomfort to end as quickly as possible. Their decisions are fast, impulsive, and almost always costly, not because they are unintelligent, but because their internal state is governing them instead of them governing their internal state. They react before they think, speak before they understand, move before they see clearly, and then spend the time afterward cleaning up what the reaction created. The second type has something the first one doesn't understand. They act from a strange clarity. They take their time, they observe before they react, they speak less and listen more, and when they finally move, they do so with a precision that looks almost supernatural from the outside. But there is no magic there. There is training. There is a mind that learned to create a pause between the impulse and the action. A mind that learned that the space between what happens and what you do with it is not empty. It is where every important decision actually gets made. You have had moments of that clarity yourself. Think about a situation that felt impossible in the moment, where you acted from panic or anger, and then days later, when the storm had passed, you saw exactly how you could have handled it differently. That clarity you felt afterward, that should have done it differently, that arrived when it was too late to be useful. That was your mind operating without the pressure of the emotional state. That was your judgment functioning correctly. The question is, how do you bring that judgment into the moment when you actually need it, when the storm is still active, when the pressure is real, and when everything in you is pulling toward the reaction? The answer is not complicated, but it is not easy either. And the distinction between complicated and easy matters here enormously. Most people have a fundamental misunderstanding about what calm actually is. They think a calm person is someone who doesn't feel, who doesn't suffer, who has somehow numbed themselves to the difficulty of being alive. They think that if you are calm in a hard situation, you must not fully understand how hard it is. That is exactly wrong. Real calm, the kind that has actual power, is not the absence of a storm. It is the eye of it, the place where everything is moving with violence around you. But the center, there is a stillness that does not yield. That stillness is not achieved by ignoring the chaos. It is achieved by training the mind not to confuse itself with it. Think about the difference between a tree with deep roots and a tree with shallow roots. When the wind comes, the first one bends, moves with the force of it, feels the full weight of what is hitting it, and holds. The second one falls, not because the wind was stronger the second time, but because the roots were not deep enough to hold. The calm person is not the one who doesn't feel the wind. They're the one whose roots go deep enough that the wind cannot take them down. And those roots are not something you were born with. They are something you build. Here is something that most conversations about emotional control completely miss. And it is the thing that makes people fail every time they try to change how they respond. Suppressing your emotions is not the same as regulating them. Not even close. The people who build a wall of indifference, who shut everything down and call it strength, who pride themselves on not feeling, are not closer to calm. They are further from it, because suppression is not regulation. Suppression is accumulation under pressure. And everything that accumulates without being processed finds a breaking point eventually, almost always at the worst possible moment, almost always in the most costly possible way. You have seen this. The person who seems completely in control for months and then completely loses it over something small. The one who never shows emotion until one day they show all of it at once. That is not someone who mastered their inner world. That is someone who locked it up and waited for the lock to break. Real calm is not the absence of feeling. It is feeling fully, completely, without being swept away by what you feel. It is the difference between being in the water and being underwater. You can be in the water, feel its temperature, its resistance, its weight, and still breathe. You can be underwater and feel all of those same things, but without the ability to choose your direction. The goal is not to get out of the water. The goal is to learn to breathe inside it. Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire in the world. He faced wars, plagues, betrayals, the deaths of people he loved, and the constant pressure of decisions that affected millions. And every morning, he wrote private notes to himself, not for publication, not for anyone else to read, not to build a reputation for wisdom. He wrote them to remind himself how to think, to maintain the discipline of his own mind in the face of everything the world kept throwing at him. One of the things he wrote, which has survived 2,000 years, was this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was not writing that from a position of ease. He was writing it in the middle of everything difficult that his life contained, because he understood something that most people never figure out, that the quality of your decisions, the quality of your relationships, the quality of everything you build and everything you experience flows from one source: the state of your mind in the moment you act. You can have every skill in the world, every resource, every advantage, but if you walk into the decisive moment from fear, from anger, from the urgency of wanting the discomfort to end, those skills will not be fully available to you. Your mind needs to be in the right place for your capabilities to express themselves completely. The samurai understood this so precisely that in their code of life, before every real confrontation, the mental preparation took longer than the physical preparation, because they knew that state determines outcome. Not skill alone, not strength alone, not preparation alone. State. And this applies everywhere, not just on a battlefield, not just for emperors. In a negotiation, the person who remains calm has a structural advantage over the one who is anxious. In a difficult conversation, the person who speaks from serenity has more influence than the one who raises their voice. In a decision that matters, the person who can think clearly under pressure makes better choices than the one deciding from emotional urgency. Calm is not passivity. Calm is concentrated power. So how do you build it? Because everything we've talked about so far means nothing if it stays theoretical. The roots are built in the daily practice of the pause, not in the big moments and the small ones. Every time something minor irritates you and you choose not to follow the irritation immediately, you're building a root. Every time someone says something that provokes you and you take one breath before you respond, you're building a root. Every time you sit in silence for 10 minutes and let your mind settle instead of immediately filling the quiet with noise and distraction. You are building a root. None of those things feel significant in the moment. They feel almost too small to matter. But the roots that hold you when the storm comes are built entirely out of those small moments, accumulated over days and months and years until they go deep enough to hold. There is something else that helps build this, and it is the practice of honest self-observation. Not judgment, not criticism, not the internal voice that says you should have done better. Just watching. After a reaction that cost you something, sitting with it honestly and asking what was actually happening inside you in that moment. What was the fear underneath the anger? What was the need underneath the urgency? What were you actually protecting when you lost your composure? Most people never ask those questions because the answers are uncomfortable. But the mind that can observe its own functioning is already closer to governing it. And governing, it is the only thing that actually changes the pattern. Let me ask you something before we finish, and I want you to take it seriously. Where are you making the most important decisions of your life from? From clarity or from fear? From reflection or from the urgency of wanting the discomfort to end? From who you actually are or from the emotional state of the moment? Because the answer to that question determines almost everything else. Not your circumstances, not your past, not what other people have done or failed to do. The origin point of your decisions is the single most determining factor in the quality of your life. And here is what I want you to understand, not as motivation, not as something that sounds good for an afternoon and fades by evening. The most real power that exists is not power over other people. It is power over yourself, over your response, over your state, over the quality of the mind you bring to the moments that matter. And that power is available to you. Not when the circumstances improve, not when life gets easier, not when you finally have enough time or enough support or enough reason to feel calm. Now, in the next moment, something provokes you. In the next moment, pressure arrives and everything in you pulls toward the reaction. In that moment, the pause is available. The breath is available. The choice is available. And every time you use it, every time you choose the pause over the reaction, the response over the impulse, the clarity over the urgency, you are building something. Quietly, invisibly, without anyone seeing or applauding. Roots. And the person with roots deep enough to hold in any storm, that person is not controlled by what happens to them. They are shaped by how they choose to meet it. And that choice, made consistently over time in the small moments that nobody sees, is the only thing that has ever truly changed a life. If this video moves something in you, if something you heard today made you stop and think, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together. See you in the next one.